Welcome to Eat, Sleep, Wine, Repeat, a podcast for all you wine lovers who, if you're like me, just cannot get enough of the good stuff. I'm Janina, your host, brand ambassador, wine educator, and sommelier. So stick with me as we dive deeper into this ever-evolving, wonderful world of wine. And wherever you are listening to this, cheers to you. Hello, wine friends, and welcome back. Today, we're heading somewhere that never fails to stir the soul, the senses, and usually a healthy thirst for adventure. I am talking about Spain, and today we're going to be digging a little bit deeper into the less familiar. We're going to be traveling through the diverse regions where Garnacha is truly coming into its own, looking at why quality has soared and how the grape has shaken off its more rustic reputation, and the fascinating history, earlier struggles that's kind of shaped the wines that we're enjoying today. Then we will pop the cork on Cava, because there's actually something really exciting going on over there. We're going to talk about how the quality is rising, the move towards organics, and demystifying a little bit more the new Cava de Guarda Superior category, what it means and why it matters when you're choosing a bottle. We're also going to shine a light on some once unloved varieties that are finally getting their moment, or at least I hope they are. Airén and Bobal. I mean, these grapes, they were long overlooked, but are now producing genuinely thrilling wines if you know where to look. And if you stick with us to the very end, you'll get some brilliant tips on how to drink sherry in different ways, how to understand it a little bit more. Guiding us on today's journey is guest and a personal friend of mine, Ellie Scott. He's a wine writer, Spanish wine expert, and the UK's sherry ambassador. So she has just returned from Barcelona Wine Week. So fresh with everything in our mind, I've pinned her down to spill all of the Spanish wine gossip. So go grab yourself a refreshing glass of Verdejo or perhaps a mineral-rich Priorat red and settle in as we explore some beautifully off-the-beaten-path Spanish wines. Ellie, I'm very excited. Are you excited about this conversation?
I am excited.
Fabulous, because as far as I know, you have just come back from Barcelona Wine Week. So, I mean, before we start getting a little geekier and talking about the grape varieties that you tasted, what we need to know about, I mean, what is it actually like being in Barcelona Wine Week? I have never actually been there myself.
So Barcelona Wine Week is actually not a week. I think if it was a week, I might have come back absolutely exhausted. It's 3 days of a big wine fair in Barcelona itself. So really accessible from the airport and the centre of town in Barcelona. And it's a big wine fair just focused on Spanish wines. So this year they had 1,350 wineries represented, over 90 appellations, so 90 DOs from Spain. I think the visitor numbers were something just over 25,000 visitors, of which a big majority are Spanish, but 20% are international visitors. And I just love it. I love it because it's in Barcelona and I get to go and see Barcelona and eat great food and drink nice wines while I'm out and about in Barcelona. But I also love that it's such a focus on Spanish wines as well.
Do you know, honestly, I'm actually shocked and scared by the fact that you said 90 DOs. Now, we all know that there are small sub-regions that have their own DO and so on, but 90, okay.
Yeah, so you probably won't be surprised to hear that I did not try wine from all 90 DOs. And
disappointed.
I think it's, like all big wine fairs, Paris. I haven't been to Provine myself, but from what I hear, Provine, in Italy, you have to really concentrate on the things that you focus on what you want to taste, because you're never going to be able to taste everything or anywhere near everything. So yeah, I really tried to focus on what I wanted to taste, and things that I hadn't tried before was really what I was looking at this time.
Yes. Well, okay. Let's focus on the themes, or was there any patterns? Of course, you haven't tasted from every DO, you only tasted certain things, but did you see anything being thrown in your face? What's going on in Spain right now?
I mean, I think given that there were so many wines there, I think that was sort of half the wineries in Spain were represented at the fair, which is incredible. And then even more in the masterclasses and talks as well. But I think it's a little bit representative of wine themes as a whole across across the world. So definitely some chat around low and no. Definitely in terms of wines, looking at kind of fresher styles, whether that's whites or rosés. We were chatting just before this about a masterclass that I went to on rosés, so I can tell you a bit more about that later. Also, things like lower extraction, less use of very heavy oak in wines. I think that kind of fresher style is a trend that we're seeing across the world, but especially in Spain, it's quite important in places like Ribera, Rioja, where they're perhaps traditionally known for very oaked wines, and maybe they're leaning towards a kind of fresher style now. So yeah, look, I mean, pulling trends from so many wines is always difficult, but I think those are some of the things that I noticed.
Well, can we talk about rosé? Because actually, exactly what you said. If somebody is kind of new to Spain, it's Rioja that they know first. The first wines that they possibly experienced, especially if you were drinking wines 10 years ago, are big, oaky Riojas. And now actually Spain is producing far more white wine. The people around the whole world are drinking more white wine. So there is that shift, I guess, globally. People obviously, rosé and sparkling is definitely going up, certainly in the UK for consumption. So talk to me, you went to a rosé masterclass. So what was the takeaway? What were they trying to showcase there?
Yeah, so rosé and sparkling. I in fact went to the two masterclasses that I went to. One was on rosé, so that was with Sarah Jane Evans, and then one was a Cava masterclass. We can talk about that as well. That was to do with food pairing, which is always a nice thing to study. So the Rosé masterclass was with Sarah Jane Evans, Master of Wine, obviously a Spanish wine expert, and it was really focusing on, I guess, some of the more modern styles of Spanish rosé, and trying to show people that not all rosé from Spain is that kind of slightly sweeter, maybe not particularly high quality, almost always Garnacha from Navarra. I think that's what people think of when they think of a Spanish rosé. They just think, oh, it's slightly sweet, it's perhaps not great quality, and not necessarily what they're looking for. I think what we looked at in the masterclass was how there is actually a whole array of rosés, sparkling included, from lighter styles, some still kind of that traditional. One that I really enjoyed was that traditional Rioja rosado style, that kind of oxidative. Having said that, we're moving to fresher wines. Exactly, the kind of Viña Tondonia oxidative style. I actually love that. And having said we're moving away from those kind of traditional styles, sometimes I think it can be amazing. What we didn't try, but we did sort of touch on a little bit, was some clarete, and we were talking about earlier. So I guess just the difference for me in terms of clarete, I know it's getting quite trendy. Clarete is generally a field blend of white and red grapes and co-fermented. And it gives you kind of that really cherry red, light, chillable red, or dark rosé, kind of a cross between the two. And at the moment, I think, especially in the UK, there seems to be a lot of appetite for that. But the rosés that we looked at in the masterclass ranged from, really easy drinking, pale, even kind of Provençal style. Lots of them include Garnacha, of course, but some of them might be Tempranillo. Some of them included different varieties. Yes, so actually, having said that, the oxidative style that I tried, which was Martínez La Cuesta Inia, it's called HINIA, Inia Rosado, was a Reserva, and it had time in barrel, and it was made from 100% Garnacha. So, of course, Garnacha, being that thin-skinned grape variety, is perfect for making rosé, but it's not the only thing that rosé can be made out of. And actually, another wine that I picked out from the fair, not from the masterclass, but one of my other favourites, was from Tenerife.
Don't get me. Tenerife. I'm just everybody. Volcanic soils, sexy minerality, a smoky vibe. I mean, we all need to be drinking more Canarian wines.
Totally agree.
But carry on. Sorry, I interrupted you because I got a little excited. I've now calmed down. Please, may you continue. So from Tenerife. Who was it from?
So the producer's called Piedra Fluida, and actually, I know that some of their wines, I'm not entirely sure if the Rosado is available in the UK, but I know some of their wines definitely are in the UK. And that is actually a blend of Listán Blanco and Tintilla and Verdelho. And it was so gastronomic and salty and savoury. And you really got some of those kind of volcanic notes coming through. And I thought it was so interesting and I really enjoyed that.
So that's interesting because, again, typically if you're thinking about Garnacha, you're going to get like that kind of, it's higher in alcohol and it's rounder, so you get more juicier flavours. But this is an interesting thing. I mean, did you taste a lot of Garnacha? Because now, as you and I both know, the older style was, when it was not in fashion in the 1970s, and it was big and round and alcoholic and oxidized and all of that comes with it. But now they're planting at higher altitude. Everyone who's listening to this podcast regularly knows I go on about the Sierra de Gredos, close to Madrid, where it's elegant and it's planted in more mountainous terrain, and it's the Pinot Noir of Spain. So I'm quite passionate about Garnacha, considering it is a very well-known grape variety, but I feel like there's so many different styles of Garnacha, and it maybe shouldn't be put into one pigeonhole of being the bigger, rounder, juicier, alcoholic style.
Yeah, I think you're so right. I absolutely love a Garnacha, and I'm quite particular about always calling it a Garnacha because it's actually a Spanish grape, not a French grape. So I always call it Garnacha.
Are you listening to that?
But I have to say, having said how big this fair was, I didn't get the opportunity to try nearly as many Garnachas this trip as I would have liked to, because I think there are some really interesting Garnachas coming out of, as you said, some of those smaller areas, Sierra de Gredos, but also even in kind of Rioja, where perhaps Garnacha is much more drought tolerant as well. So it's really useful in some of those dry areas, kind of combating climate change, things like that, where actually Garnacha is quite resistant. So it's really useful. Obviously, at higher altitude, it's easier to control that alcohol, which can get a bit high otherwise. But I think there are some really beautiful styles of Garnacha coming out of Spain. I think Tempranillo is always going to be there, but I think it's well worth seeking out some Garnacha as well.
Well, it's interesting you said that Tempranillo is going to be there. I was looking into the plantings of Tempranillo and Garnacha, and as we know, Garnacha is Spain's grape. The birthplace is Aragon, so not actually Rioja or Navarra, which is probably a bit more famous for it. But actually, even in the 1970s, I touch on 1970s because apparently, when you do look into the history, it's almost like that was a turning point where everyone went, to Garnacha. And apparently there was 30,000 hectares planted in Rioja. And now, well, not now, but in 2020, there's only 5,000. And Tempranillo got planted more and more and more and more and more, and actually now as we understand how beautiful it can be and obviously all these bush vines, it's a grape variety that kind of grows quite straight. So bush vines is really, really possible. And with the fact that climate change is this word that is thrown around constantly. And it's like, this is a drought resistant grape variety that loves wind and heat, and it can handle all of that, maybe we should be going towards Garnacha again, more so.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in quite a few areas there are people either rediscovering those kind of old vineyards, the old bush vines, which can give such concentrated fruit, and have weathered perhaps 100 or more years, and they're quite stable vines that can still produce fruit. That I think is a useful thing to still be able to use those vines now. And also some of the kind of field blends, which Garnacha may be a big percentage of as well, with some of those rarer varieties in Rioja, for example. I think there's some really interesting producers doing great things with those as well.
We need to do, you and I, so we can come back, we need to do a tasting on Garnacha, right? Because I was just thinking I go on about Campo de Borja. This is the empire of Garnacha. So we have the empire of Garnacha. We have Navarra that's doing fantastic things and obviously really, really famous as well for the rosés, as you said, but the reds are great. You've got this elegant Pinot Noir style from Gredos, the Rioja Oriental, especially with the fact that they have altitude up to like 750 meters. There's some really amazing pockets there. What are they all doing? How are they all different? Because I think this is still quite a new it's a new category, this new wave of Garnacha.
I think you and I need to organise a Garnacha tasting and do a comparative tasting. I think we can do that.
Yeah.
We should.
Well, and also everybody listening, then we need to throw in Cannonau from Sardinia.
Absolutely.
Which is a really interesting thing, depending on what you read in history. But well, the Spanish are obviously claiming that, because this used to be a Spanish
Yes.
colony, and if the birthplace is Aragon, it makes sense that it came over to Sardinia during that time. But obviously, the Sardinians may have something slightly different to say. So, and then, as you said, we're not calling it Grenache, which is super famous in the south of France, because it came from Aragon. So we, actually, yes. So we need to maybe have some Languedoc-Roussillon Garnacha from France. We need to bring in Cannonau from Sardinia. And then, of course, Campo de Borja is this famous place with the old vines, the bush vines. We need to go Navarra. We need to try Rioja Oriental, which for anyone, it was Rioja Baja, just name change. And then we need Sierra de Gredos. Anything else? I feel like that's it, right?
I think we probably shouldn't go global, or we might be there for days tasting.
We could bring in Australia. It was one of the first grapes, I think, to get to Australia as well. Goodness me. Yes. Okay. All right.
Okay, it's a plan. It's a plan.
So what was the other masterclass? You said Cava, which
Yes.
is... they've had a bit of a image issue, haven't they,
Yes.
for many, many years. And I feel like there's maybe slowly pushing through that.
So, as you say, I do think Cava's had an image problem for a while in the UK particularly, but also elsewhere, but especially in export markets. And just to get a little bit technical, they lost a lot of producers who sort of set up their own associations, such as Corpinat, Classic Penedès. There are others as well. And so Cava has really had to kind of rally to promote its image. And I think the masterclass that I went to was actually fascinating, because it was showing how versatile Cava can be with food. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. But what I loved was trying some of the really, really long lees-aged Cavas. And one of the other things that they have been doing, not with the long lees-aged ones because they're too old, but they are trying to catch up with their competitors, really. And Classic Penedès, I think, is 100% organic. I'm pretty sure that Corpinat is as well.
So Corpinat would definitely. So they've
And now Cava will be as well from the 2025 harvest. So for the Cava de Guarda Superior, so everything above the kind of standard level of Cava. So I think they've really worked on improving their image. And part of that is obviously the organic side, but showing people like me and consumers what Cava can do, how great it can be, that it's not maybe just that kind of, I think a lot of people have that image of Cava as being cheap and not great quality. And I think if those same consumers could try some of the more premium Cavas with longer lees aging, more complex flavours, try it with food, then hopefully we will all learn to love Cava again, as I do.
So you said about food, said about food pairings. What did they give you food at the same time?
They did. It was actually amazing.
Okay, so, that is a masterclass I am down for.
Yes, so it was actually a masterclass with the sommelier from Sobre Tablas, which, as you know, I'm a big Andalusia fan, and this restaurant is in, I think it's in Sevilla.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a lot of Andalusian cuisine, and so the chef Camila Ferraro was making little dishes for all of us in the masterclass, and we had 2 Cava pairings with each little dish, and then the sommelier Robert Tetas was talking us through the Cavas and why each pairing went with the Cavas. So one of the kind of themes throughout was explaining that the elements that you need in each dish to go with the Cava tended to be something acidic, something crunchy, and something saline, something salty, savoury. So one of my favourite pairings was a tortilla de gamba blanca, which was...
Whoa. What? What?
So if you've ever been to Andalusia, you have to go to Sanlúcar, where they make manzanilla. Okay, yeah. And they do tortillas de camarones, which are basically these very thin...
Cameron is okay. Like,
very, very, very thin. I mean, I think the English translation would be an omelette, but it's not an omelette. Don't think that it's an omelette.
It doesn't
It's a very, very thin, deep fried, crispy little pancake type thing. And the one in Sanlúcar is made with these teeny tiny little shrimps that are whole. They don't bother peeling them. They're honestly, it's my favorite thing. Now I'm salivating just thinking about it.
Okay.
But the one that they made in the masterclass was with actually raw white prawns on like a little crispy tortillita. So a little crispy sort of pancake.
Wow.
With raw prawns and the creaminess. I don't know if you've ever had raw prawns, that creaminess.
Yes, I've had Sicilian red prawns, which obviously you can cook and they're delicious, but when you have them raw, yes, it's almost like that oily, creamy, mouth-filling texture that it gives you.
Yes. So you can imagine how well, and imagine the fried, oily tortilla underneath, and then the creaminess of, am I making you hungry? The creaminess of the raw prawns on top. You can imagine how well that goes with a high acidity, but creamy, sparkling wine, such as a lees-aged cava. So to me, that was just the most beautiful pairing. And one of the pairings that I loved with that was the Codogno. It's called Ars Collector El Trosnu. So it's a Guarda Superior Paraje Calificado.
Oof, yeah, right to the top.
So very high quality cava. It was 2011, and the creaminess of the cava matched the creaminess of the prawns, the sparkling sensation and the crispness of the cava cut through the oiliness of the tortilla. I mean, I'm making myself hungry now.
and probably everyone listening. I'm going to pause you because you have to carry on storytelling here. But for anybody who's going, what the hell is this superior category? You mentioned the Cava de Paraje Calificado. That is the highest. That's the pinnacle. Has to be single site. And when you say lees aging, so the time that the wine is spending in the bottle in contact with the yeast, it has to be at least 36 months. So this is, the maximum. Whereas if you see a Reserva, it's 18 months, isn't it? And Grand Reserva is 30. So there will be quality. This is, I guess, advice for anyone going, okay, yeah, but how am I going to know? There's going to be the quality stamps on the bottle. So when you pick up a cava, look, and there will be a stamp that will say Superior Reserva, Gran Reserva, or this Paraje Calificado.
Exactly. And those, I think those really are the cavas to look out for. And I mean, I was very lucky that this tasting, the masterclass with the food pairings, was only the superior category. So slightly higher quality, longer lees aged. I mean, we're talking about lees aging, that time in bottle. Obviously, cava is a traditional method sparkling. And I think sometimes if people look at, the basic cava, the average consumer might not necessarily realize that it's traditional method. And I think some of the options that we can get in this country are just incredible value.
Yeah, no, I think finally I'm so happy that they have caught up really with Classic Penedès, or more Corpinat, because at the end of the day, Corpinat were cava producers that said that, put two fingers up to cava because they were sick and tired when they were so quality focused being lumped in with, ironically, you mentioned Cornouaille.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Freshnay who are the two big ones, but it's their cheapest bottlings, and kind of the fact that they get their grapes, machine harvested, chuck it out in less than a year. And people go, oh yeah, cava should be always, it's less than £10. It's Spain's equivalent to Prosecco.
Yeah.
No, it is not. And so, there's that transition now that they're all, the quality really is the big focus, isn't it?
Absolutely. And as you said, I really think that Corpinat and then Classic Penedès and other associations like that really forced Cava's hand in terms of, putting their socks up and upping the quality. And that's really what they're trying to show now. And as you said, I mentioned Codogno, and I think it's always good to recognise that just because one producer might be known for a certain style doesn't mean that they're not producing wines at other levels, and not to be too snobby.
Well, did you have any other? You've tasted, obviously, it sounds to me like you did actually taste quite a bit of cava. You've now mentioned one bottle recommendation. Was there any other cavas or cava producers that really surprised you or you fell in love with?
I think one producer that I'd never heard of before was Mestres. And I think you've probably, in fact, all of the listeners have probably now realised that I love long lees aged sparklings. And I love...
Do they?
Have you noticed? And we actually tried 2 in the masterclass, which came, I think they both came with, one came with the sweeter dish and one came with a beautiful beef rib cannelloni, which was it was mushroomy. See, it was mushroomy, and then it still had those elements of the crunchiness and the creaminess and the savouriness, but the mushroom notes meant that it went really well with the older style sparkling. And there was one that we tried from a producer called Cansala. It was also a Paraje Calificado. It was a 2013. It had been aging for 144 months on the lees.
144 months.
So if my maths is correct, that's 12 years.
Oh, okay, good. I was literally taking my calculator to work out what does that mean. Oh no, wait, 100 how many months?
144.
Oh, 144. Okay, fine. Yeah.
Is that 12 times 12?
It's 12 years. Oh, actually, oh my God. You know what? That's 12. Like, I should know my 12 times table. Moving on.
It's okay. The next one I talked about is 168 months, and I did have to get my phone out to check how long that was. The other one that I really enjoyed was Mestres Masvia, which is actually a Gran Reserva from 2009. I tried in the masterclass, and then actually we found it on a wine list at El Viña del Señor in Barcelona, and La Viña del Señor even in Barcelona. And we bought a bottle of a different vintage because it's so delicious. It's just, if you really want something kind of rich and creamy and that sort of butterscotch, like just richness enveloping you, then something that's been aging for that long is just always a treat to me. So those were my kind of picks of the long lees aged at the masterclass.
Love that. Well, you obviously were going around tasting as much wine as is humanly possible, which is not that much, as people realise in 3 days. Was there a grape variety, a specific wine, a winery that you were in front of and you thought, okay, no, I need to tell people about this?
Well, I think we touched on this when we were talking before the podcast, that I really know nothing about DO Alella, but I went with someone else who took me over to try some wines. It is the smallest DO in Spain. It has only 200 hectares. It has only 7 wineries. And it's actually quite an old DO. I learned something that I didn't know, which was that a lot of the old DOs are named after a town. So Alella is a town, Jerez is a town. But actually then the newer DOs tend to be named after a region. So they're not named after one specific town. So Rioja, Ribera. So that was something quite interesting. Little fact.
Fun fact.
Fun fact. But what I really enjoyed, I mean, I like niche things. As you know, I'm a sherry expert. So I like and Georgia. So always looking for the niche and unusual. And DO Alella is certainly niche. They used to be really quite important wine producers, especially for the Barcelona region. And that shrunk because of the...
It's so sad.
Yeah, because really all of the land was taken up by people building either for residential or for tourist properties. And some of the pictures that you can see, I mean, it's beautiful. You can see the sea, but the size has just shrunk, as we said, to 200 hectares now. And the main variety is called Pansa Blanca. And I don't think, I know you love Pansa Blanca, but I don't know if I'd ever tried it before. So it was really interesting to try that. And they also, I mean, I think it's common in other areas of Catalonia as well, but they produce skin contact, so an orange wine that they call Brisat, Brisat. Brisat.
Ah, so no, brand new for me. And the reason I got excited, I said to you when you mentioned Alella, the DO, is that everybody, I'm going to embarrass myself a little bit, but I mean, it is still on the internet. So I'm going to link in the show notes my video going back, I want to say 6 or 7 years, that I started on YouTube. Then I realized video footage was a hell of a lot harder than audio footage. And one of my first ever videos was tasting a Pansa Blanca, which for anybody who hasn't heard of this is what they call Xarel, and Xarel is one of the three main grapes of Cava, and it has this kind of that earthiness to it, and this lovely gorgeous texture. And it can be really fresh and mineral led there. And I, that obviously when I tasted this Pansa Blanca, I did this video. It's cringy now to see myself with such terrible, background, and absolutely there's no theatre behind it whatsoever. But yeah, it's such a cool region. And this is about, I think, 15 kilometers from Barcelona. It's so close.
Yes,
so it's so sad that it is continuing to disappear.
Yeah, I mean, with only 7 wineries, I think certainly some of them have kind of held on to it because, I mean, one of the ladies that I spoke to, she said, we don't want to be the generation that doesn't hold on to this. So they want to keep producing wine there. And I really hope that they continue to kind of protect it, and perhaps it can even grow a bit. But I think the growth might be difficult because it is now surrounded by property.
Well, everybody listening, perhaps if we all go visit them, buy some of their wine, check out whatever country you're in, see if there is a wine from DO Alella, and this is ALELLA, isn't it?
Yeah.
Google it, buy a bottle, and see if we can help them out. Maybe we can grow them again. And what about some other? You've talked about Pansa Blanca. What about other grape varieties? Did you taste any others and go, God, why are we not talking about this more?
So, I mean, as we were talking about Xarel, so Pansa Blanca, I did try quite a few Xarelos, and I think we mainly talk about Xarel or Xarel in reference to Cava, being one of the kind of main 3 grape varieties that is in Cava. But I really enjoyed trying some Xarel both at the fair and at some of the wine bars in Barcelona. So widely grown in the Penedès region and in Catalonia. I think it's got a really lovely texture and body to it. It can be different things. It can be so mineral, or it can be a little bit kind of smoky and reductive. And I think it's just really interesting. And some people are using it with a little bit of skin contact. I actually tried one, I think, that had some chestnut barrels.
Oh, cool.
Rather than oak, some in concrete. So I think, I mean, in Penedès, they're doing some really, really interesting things. And I really like Xarel as a grape variety. I think also talking about my love for niche regions, I'm also always like to kind of find those unloved grape varieties that have been a little bit forgotten about. So things like Bobal, Airén. I mean, I think Godello sadly is not forgotten about. I love a good Godello as well. But yes, Airén, for example, one of those great varieties that has been used for making brandy and for bulk wine, and really seen, a workhorse variety, and not seen as being able to make particularly distinguished, sophisticated wines. But I have had the opportunity to try some really great old vine Airén, perhaps barrel fermented. There's a great producer called Bodegas Cerrón. They make
absolutely. Well, we side note, everyone. Ellie and I both went to Jumilla, which everyone, honestly, it's the wild, wild west, go. And so we tasted together from this winery, and they make definitely hands down one of the best Airéns I've ever tasted. So sorry, please continue.
I mean, I agree. I still dream about that wine, to be honest, barrel fermented Airén. And I think, we need to still keep trying these varieties that might have been a little bit forgotten about, or I guess like Cava, where the reputation wasn't always the best. So I mentioned Bobal. I visited Utiel-Requena a couple of years ago, which is inland from Valencia, and Bobal was seen as, for a long time, and perhaps still a little bit now, seen as one of those grape varieties. So it's a red grape variety, and it was used for bulk wine. It was shipped off here, there, and everywhere, and used for blending, and I think sometimes for rosé. But it can make really quite intense wines. I went to an estate called Paraje de Guarda, and they make some really beautiful, intense, concentrated Bobal. And they say that's down to their dry farming and slightly older vines, perhaps. And that's, I think, yes, you can get some Bobal that is maybe less intense, less quality driven.
You mean rubbish?
How do you say that in a nice way?
Rubbish. I think you would stop beating around the bush. You can get some.
You can get some terrible
Bobal.
Bobal, and I think if you want something super cheap and it's not great, then Bobal is probably a good option, because there are still some, bulk made Bobals. But I think you can also find some. I would say look out for someone like Vera de Estenas, and I also visited Chotas Carrascal. They have a lot of Vinos de Pago, so the kind of top quality level of appellation wine. They have a Vino de Pago at Chotas Carrascal, which is up on. It's really interesting when you're in Spain, because you think about altitude totally differently. You're on quite flat land, and then you realise you're actually up at 800 or 900 metres above sea level, and you're just up on the high plateau on the meseta, and they get snow there, and you're really only an hour and a bit from Valencia, from the coast on the Mediterranean. So it's really interesting, and they have, I know, definitely a couple of wines in the UK, including one called Las Ocho, which is a blend of 8 grape varieties. I can't remember off the top of my head if Bobal is one of them, but they certainly have some beautiful wines. And Utiel-Requena is one of those regions that's slightly forgotten about, I think. But yeah, look out for Bobal and Utiel-Requena.
So yeah, I agree with you. And I was saying I don't drink enough Bobal. So I love that we are touching on this. And for everybody who is going, well, what is Bobal? I mean, first of all, the reason it can be crap is because it does sometimes have this uneven ripening, and so often it can be this kind of a little bit rustic, doesn't have the concentration, and maybe a bit bitter. There are some old vines, so this is actually very much like kind of the Garnacha story. Equally, this could be another great variety that is amazing for climate change, because it's drought resistant. It likes hot areas as well, so this should be maybe something we're investing in. But I mean, how would you describe Bobal? For me, it's like kind of this blue and red fruited kind of wine that can be quite full, and with this kind of maybe like a chocolatey licorice spice maybe at its best. But how would you describe Bobal?
I think you're right. I think like we were saying, and it's still one of the main grape varieties in Spain. So it's actually, given that a lot of people, I would guess that the average consumer in the UK has never heard of Bobal. It's actually, I think, one of the top 5 grown grape varieties in Spain. So there is still a lot that's being made as bulk Bobal. And I'll be honest, I can't really tell you what that's like, but I imagine it's not, it's just a bit fruity, and that's kind of it. But some of the higher quality premium definitely has a bit darker fruit. It's got, it can be sort of slightly grainy, but like soft tannins. And yeah, a little bit rustic, but I think if it's treated well, that can be in a good way, if that makes sense.
Where it gives a bit, whereas there's this
structure.
Little structure, isn't there? Yeah. Even more like tea, the tannins maybe are more like tea leaves. If anybody's ever had their tea bag and all of the bit, and there's a hole in your tea bag, and then you have that sip and it kind of coats your tongue, but it's grainy, but it's not horrible, and you know, kind of a bit like that maybe.
One of the other things that I forgot to mention actually was that the Utiel-Requena and Bobal, because that's where it was, they use tinajas a lot. So they have been making wine there for 2,000 years or something. And the ancient way of making wine was in tinajas. And I think some people are starting to use those again. So if you visit Utiel and Requena, you can visit wineries and just visit cellars that have these enormous clay pots. So they're down in the cellars. They are, I mean, I stood next to one, and I'm nearly 6 foot tall, and it was much, much bigger than me. And it's amazing to see these enormous old clay pots that they were making wine in centuries ago. And I really like that some producers are starting to use that in their winemaking again today. And that's something, I guess, a little bit different.
Love that. So am I right? I've not been to the DO Utiel-Requena. If I wanted to, would the best advice be to fly into Valencia and then drive inland about an
hour-ish? Yeah, it's about an hour-ish. You go past Buñuel, if you know Buñuel, for the tomatina fight that they have there, where they throw tomatoes at each other after the tomato harvest.
Like it. Got to be done, everyone. Put that on the list.
Yes, and it does feel like being a little bit in the middle of nowhere. It's not I think as soon as you go inland from there, and past Buñuel, and it's kind of in the middle of nowhere, but worth a visit.
Okay, there we go. Everybody, go and search out Bobal. Go think about a trip after you fight with tomatoes, then go down and check out
don't
this region.
Don't just throw it at people. It has to be on a specific day.
Oh, yes, exactly. Find out when that is actually happening. So in terms of tasting different wines there, you are a sherry expert, UK sherry ambassador. I'm assuming that you went and tasted some sherry, did you not?
I did go and taste some sherry. I also went to taste some wines from someone who was very kind to me, Tommy from Diatomists. So they make sherries, and he also has some unfortified wines that he is now making from his vineyard that I visited when I was out there in 2022. So it was really amazing to taste those wines from his estate. And that's obviously not under sherry, but they make sherries as well. So their Fino.
No, precisely. And I love that you're mentioning that, because actually only on a few episodes, the episode that came out, I think on December the 1st, if people go back, I was drinking one of their wines. So it's nice for you to talk.
The Dominio de las Animas. Amazing. So I won't talk too much about the wines then, because you've already tried, but their Fino, Diatomist's Fino, is now being made from that vineyard as well, which is amazing because
So is this the same vineyard? So the one that I had was a Pedro Ximénez grape. So yes, that's the one. It was Christmas dedicated.
Lovely.
Like, why would you not want to drink Pedro Ximénez? So that, but from the same vineyard because again,
some of their sherries are from different vineyards, from different bodegas, but the Fino that is out now is actually from Tommy's vineyard in Balbaina, which is between Jerez and El Puerto de Santa Maria. And I love this Fino. I had some at Christmas with my dad. He is now a Diatomists fan as well. And yes, it was really nice to try the Fino that's now come from that vineyard.
Okay. Right. Let's stop for a second and say, right, somebody is kind of new to sherry. In fact, actually, at the end of the day, sherry, it's a tough one because there's so many different styles of sherry. People often feel like it's like an old-fashioned wine, quote unquote, even though there's loads of wines, or it's what your grandma used to drink. So what are 5? You could go more than 5, but give me 5 facts about sherry that might surprise people, or like, this is your moment to sell it to us. How are you going to bring us in to want to explore sherry? Go. Tick, tick,
Go.
tick, tick, tick. No, tick.
Well, I think the first things, and especially when I'm talking to consumers about sherry, I think firstly, it's realizing that sherry is just from Spain. So I always have to explain that, Champagne is from Champagne. Sherry is from the Jerez region in the very south of Spain. It's a fortified wine. All the wine grapes that go into making sherry are white. I think that certainly surprises some consumers when you see some of the colours of sherry that come out, especially Pedro Ximénez that you touched on. You see that in your glass, and I tell them it's a white grape variety, and that's certainly surprising to some people. I think just telling people that there are dry styles of sherry. Most people think that all sherry is sweet, and it's what their grandma drank, and their grandma probably drank Harvey's Bristol cream. And
which, by the way, I love the cream category, everyone. Can we all just drink more of it?
I think that Harvey's Bristol cream over ice, slice of orange, delicious. There are also some incredibly premium cream sherries. I love Lustau, East India.
Yes. Honestly, anybody who likes just a sweet wine, and not Pedro Ximénez, by the way, is incredible, but it is sticky, sweet, richest thing you can ever have, hence why it's so good with ice cream. But like, we're talking often like 400 grams of residual sugar per litre. Like, this is insane. A cream is like sweet but a bit nutty, and it's a bit easier to get on with, ironically.
Yes, and I totally agree. And maybe that's the gateway drug. Maybe that's the gateway sherry. But I personally I love salty, savoury things. So I love the dry styles. I love the biologically aged sherries. So those sherries that have aged under this protective layer of thick yeast that grows on top of the wine and gives those kind of bready, marmitey, yeasty, bruised apple, salty aromas. That's what I love. And all sherries go so well with food, and actually part of that is down to the fact that they don't have super high acidity. So it means they can pair well with things that don't always pair well with wine, because wine has generally a higher acidity. So things that are hard to pair, mushrooms, asparagus, artichokes, pair really well with a dry sherry like Amontillado. Amontillado and mushroom risotto, delicious. I also think that if you're scared about trying sherry, have a sherry cocktail. Put your Fino, that salty Fino. If you don't want to just have it on its own with some almonds and olives and salty snacks and ham on. I mean, I think ham on goes with everything. If you don't, I've talked about food too much in this podcast.
No, you have not.
If you don't want to have it on its own, then why not have it in a martini or have it with a tonic? Fino and tonic, delicious. And there are so many cocktails that actually, if you're having a Fino and tonic, that's lower alcohol than having a gin and tonic. So maybe that's a reason to have a little taste. I think maybe if we're talking about things that surprise people, there are a lot of consumers who maybe see sherry in the same category as spirits. So that is one of the things that I like to point out, that actually Fino is 15%. And if you're drinking a super heavy red wine from California or Italy, then chances are that's also 15%. So, and you're probably not having a giant, I mean, I might have a giant glass of Fino, but most people are probably not having a giant glass of Fino. So yes, perhaps lower alcohol than people might realise. Have I given you more than 5 facts now?
I don't know. I wasn't really counting, to be honest. But okay, interesting. So if somebody's saying, okay, Fino, now I'd love for you just to maybe touch on this drier style, because we don't have much time left. We can't go through everything. But if someone's interested, they might go, Fino, okay, but hang on, what's Manzanilla?
Mm-hmm.
I'd love for you just to break down the difference, but also maybe en rama as well, because I'm actually... I'll say this really quietly. I'm not that much of a fan of Fino. So, I mean, I will drink it and I get it, but it's not necessarily my go-to. But I have to say, what changed my mind a lot on its quality was actually en rama, because of what I felt was a lot more of the concentration. So how about we sum up this episode? You get a few minutes left to sell to us Fino, Manzanilla, and also explain what en rama is if somebody wants to go down that route. Go!
Okay, so Fino, as I was saying, Fino aged under a protective layer of yeast, and that's what gives it those salty bread dough, olive brine, savoury aromas. Manzanilla made in the same way, but Manzanilla has to be made in the town of San Lucar de Barrameda, which is on the coast. It has a much more humid climate. The yeast that grows there is different. Manzanilla tends to be more pungent on the nose maybe, but a bit more delicate in style. Fino can be a bit more powerful. And it's just to do with where they've been aging. So all sherry is an average age. That's probably for a different podcast. But Manzanilla means chamomile, and some people say that it can have those slightly floral chamomile notes on the nose, slightly more delicate, goes perfectly with tortillitas de camarones that I was mentioning earlier. En rama is a style that is becoming more and more popular. It's basically minimally filtered, either Fino or Manzanilla, but also other styles of sherry are being made en rama as well. You can have palo cortado, amontillado, other dry styles. And it basically means raw. I mean, it means literally on the branch, but that means nothing. But the idea is that it's minimally filtered and that it tastes as if it's come straight out of the barrel. So you're in the bodega, you're trying it. The venenciador has stuck his little tool in to get your sherry when you're trying it straight from the barrel, which if you get the opportunity to do, I highly recommend.
Okay, awesome. Now, one thing you haven't mentioned, the grape variety.
Oh, I haven't mentioned the grape variety. So main grape variety for sherry is Palomino. And as we touched on, sweeter styles from Pedro Ximénez and also from Moscatel, which I love a Moscatel. They're not found quite as often. But Palomino is the queen there. And we touched earlier on the Canary Islands, known as Listan Blanco in the Canary Islands. And yes, give some more love to Palomino.
I will also link in the show notes an episode I did years ago on Palomino as a still variety. It is definitely a much more meditative grape variety. It doesn't just offer you this bouquet or this intensity on the nose. It's something much more about texture, restraint. It whispers secrets to you, doesn't it? There's something about Palomino for somebody who really wants to explore grapes and take their time with it. Palomino is a really, really beautiful one to experience as a still.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, you've got one last question. What do you want our listeners to take away from this conversation about choosing their next Spanish wine?
I hope what you will take away is that there is a huge diversity of wines in Spain. And so if you think of Spain as just being Rioja and Albariño, then please remember there is a whole world of other great varieties and regions to explore, from fortifieds to sparkling to rosés, whites, crisp whites, oaked whites, fresh reds, oaky reds. There is a whole range of diversity, and that's what I hope someone takes away.
I love it. Everybody just explore. Yeah, there's a real new wave going on in Spain for sure, isn't there?
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Maybe I'll go and even have a glass of Fino. Nah, I won't. Thank you for all of your knowledge and sharing of what you saw at Barcelona Wine Week. I'll speak to you soon.
Speak to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, there is so much to discover with Spanish wine, but then again, there's so much with Italian too, and that's where we are going next week. We're heading to the Lang in Piemonte, one of the favourite wine regions of my guest, Agnes Ginteri, who is a master wine student and communicator behind the YouTube channel No Sediment. So get ready to dive into some lesser known grape varieties. I will leave you, as always, with a wine quote to inspire the week. Manzanilla is the closest wine ever made to saltwater and sunshine. That was said by John Bonnet, wine writer and author. Now, if you're enjoying the podcast, please share it with a fellow wine lover. Tag me on Instagram at eatsleep_wine_repeat. Give the podcast a like and leave a review and rating on the app you are listening to. It's honestly the best way to help the podcast grow, and I'll be so grateful. Here is to a week of exploring new grapes, new wines, and new stories. Until next week, wine friends. Cheers to you.